Malware often succeeds by not breaking the newest defenses, but by forcing systems to fall back to older, weaker ones. A common tactic is protocol version downgrading, where an attacker interferes with negotiations so two parties abandon a secure standard in favor of a legacy version known to contain vulnerabilities. This strategy was famously illustrated by the padding oracle on downgrade legacy encryption attack, or Poodle attack of 2014. Poodle exploited the obsolete SSL 3.0 protocol by triggering downgrade behavior in clients and servers that supported the stronger TLS versions. The result showed how backward compatibility, intended for reliability, can instead become a powerful entry point for exploitation. Such attacks were rare. Actually exploiting Poodle, it demanded that certain criteria be met first. What if you had a protocol that was widely used by OT systems and found on virtually every device? And what if there was a CVE that had a similar person-in-the-middle attack, rolling back a protocol to do a more vulnerable version? OT system operators often lack the desire to schedule an upgrade event on critical systems, especially if it takes them offline. In a moment, my guest will tell us about a new vulnerability that's been found, and a patch that's actually included inside the protocol itself, and therefore can be installed via PowerShell. This is a story about Kerberos, its monopoly in the OT systems, and how to stay safe against this new vulnerability. I'm Robert Vamosi. This is Error Code.
I am Dor Segal, and I work in Silverfort as a security researcher team lead. Silverfort, we protect every identity, no matter if it's human, non-human, or NHI agents. Technically, we inspect authentication requests and protect it in real time.
So let's start by identifying a few things. When we think about identities today, maybe we think about username and password, or some other credentialing system for authenticating users on a system. Increasingly, there's risk in non-human identity, and these are machines talking to machines. Or what about AI talking to AI with no humans involved?
Yes, so non-human identities can be automated machines performing a single function, a functionality like in OT. And whether they're managed or not managed, they have to communicate with each other constantly, send data to each other and retrieve data and apply their automated function. They work regularly all the time, and they have set of functionality that they can do and who they can reach out to.
So in a world without any of that, it would be constantly requesting, or someone would have to approve, or deny, approve, etc. This makes it so much easier to have communication set up where they can communicate in real time.
Correct. Instead of approving every step, we put our trust in NHIs that they do exactly what we want them to do, and only that.
So we're going to focus on Kerberos. I remember studying up on Kerberos for my CISSP exam. It's been a while. So what is it, and how is it being used in the OT space today?
Kerberos is one of the oldest authentication mechanisms exists today. It was invented in '88 and by MIT, and it is even considered a modern authentication today in Active Directory on premises. And it is considered of three parts as the Kerberos three-headed dog. It is considered of the credential validation, authorization of services, ticket granting services, and the application access itself.
And it's default now within Windows Active Directory.
Correct. So even though Kerberos is kind of old, its fifth version was invented in 93, and it is being upgraded today by its modern ciphers. And even though it's kind of old, it's there are even more legacy authentication protocols like NTLM. So this one is being deprecated and replaced by Kerberos with modern ciphers.
Another distinction, let's talk a little bit about symmetric encryption versus asymmetric encryption.
There are many ways. It is based on ticket encryption. It is based on symmetric encryption, where both sides know each other's secrets. It is based on credential validation, where user enters in its credentials or provides a certificate, and the authenticating server, the KDC, the key distribution center, is validating the integrity of the credential and provides a session key.
All of this is relevant because last November there was a CVE disclosed.
Yes, so we are in my research team looking for identity type vulnerabilities. Specifically, we looked into Kerberos. Kerberos has an extension called delegation, where a machine authenticates and requests data from another resource. Kerberos delegation comes to solve a real-world problem called a double hop problem, where actually more than a security feature, where the application cannot have a full access to the resource itself or administrative access to the resource, but use and gets the data only by the user's request.
And this vulnerability, it's a person in the middle attack.
Right. So we found that we can elevate privileges of a delegated user by standing in the middle and downgrading its cipher to legacy encryption cipher called RC4 MD4, and an abuse in the legacy session key. We discovered that we can use unkeyed checksum to and alter the delegated user, which delegated user the application requests.
Okay, so there's this modern version of Kerberos, but with this vulnerability, you're able to go back to a more vulnerable legacy version.
Right. What's really nice is that the encryption type is actually in plain text. And if you change the encryption type to RC4, then it will downgrade itself to RC4. Then we can actually manipulate the delegated user, which is in a special field called PA for user, and alter it and change it to an administrative user with administrative access, or any user of our choice.
So understand that there are features within the Kerberos protocol, and one of them is delegation. How is Kerberos delegation being used in OT environments?
So even though the PLCs are not managed by Active Directory, there are others that do, like the SCADA servers or historian databases and the HMI platforms. Each one must access to each other. And if an operator must access the controlling systems, then they must perform delegation. And what's really scary is that applications perform delegation in the background because they were programmed to, and the security teams don't know that they are actually performing delegation in the backend channel. So if an adversary obtains a position of man in the middle, it doesn't even have to decrypt any part of the channel to fall back to a legacy encryption type and perform and apply the vulnerability itself. And what we know about OT is that upgrading a domain controller will shut the entire organization and enable operators to work.
So applying Patch Tuesday patches, well, not always available for the OT environment.
So in on-premises, Kerberos is the modern authentication. So there is not really an alternative. Every other alternative is considered even more legacy, like NTLM. So
Sometimes you're just stuck with Kerberos.
what I think people don't understand is that modern authentication, like OpenID Connect, works mainly over HTTP and HTTPS. They're not working over file shares access or other protocols. So we're only left with Kerberos. So in terms of Active Directory, Kerberos is the modern authentication, and delegation is our only solution for application to talk with resources.
So it's a bottleneck in that everybody's using Kerberos in the OT space. Is there a payoff here for an attacker, for example, to invest the time in deprecating Kerberos?
Correct. The risk is big in terms that upgrading the Patch Tuesday become a big challenge. And what even more concerning is that users and machine accounts that we refer to NHIs in some cases are using the same identity structure. It means that if I wanted to delegate a user, I could actually delegate a machine as well, another machine.
Right.
And that exposes machine credential itself. So in Active Directory, in addition to domain controllers that manages authentications, there are other roles to provide service, like certificates. A certificate of a server is equivalent to its own credentials. And if I was able to obtain a server's certificate, then I could gain administrative privileges to its own system, like a SCADA server. If I was able to get its machine account by obtaining its certificate, and obtaining certificates uses delegation in Active Directory. If I applied delegation in our delegation vulnerability and obtained a certificate to a SCADA machine account, then I could breach the entire system.
Okay, so it seems like the steps are A, finding out what authentications are in your machine-to-machine environments first, then enabling the flag in Kerberos to protect against revealing sensitive data.
I think monitoring delegation and every authentication and protecting machine accounts and protecting NHIs and understand how the authentication is actually working in the backend and whether your service or application needs to use it to use another resource. So what I'm saying is understand if your application needs to use another resource and authenticate to it by using Kerberos delegation.
So can you put a security control over that?
Right. However, delegation works in the way that it uses blacklists to prevent from sensitive users to perform delegation. However, machine accounts don't have it in the UI. It is hidden in the attribute flags that is called user access control, even though it's a machine. So a single PowerShell command that nobody knows about, we can actually apply the sensitive account flag to a machine account.
So the fact that this flag was hidden was probably an artifact of the days when they thought, well, as humans, we're not going to be needing this type of authentication. But to your point, it wasn't identified as machine identities back then because I think Kerberos delegation was designed for that.
So it's a single PowerShell command, and for every tier 0 application, that is in our system. And in OT, there are many tier zero machine accounts, including the domain controller themselves, which provide um, an infrastructure uh, uh, for all the authentication service in the domain, which should be protected as well. It's not well known, and the documentation is so small that when I was searching the web for it, except a small discussion, I couldn't find anything. So raising the awareness of protecting tier zero machine accounts from delegation is very important, especially in cases where um, delegation is performed and may be performed while the teams don't even know it exists. Right. First, mapping all the tier zero machine accounts. It means that every Windows-based server that performs sensitive operations that has a machine account object in the domain, then apply the tier zero, then apply the PowerShell command and validating that it was inserted into the blacklist, that user is sensitive and cannot be delegated. Because I think Kerberos delegation was designed for it was designed for users and not for machines. However, because in Active Directory, uh, all objects have the same attributes. It just they have different types. So machine accounts are considered as just additional type of authenticating entity. So in the protocol, it doesn't matter which entity is being delegated to as long as it exists in the domain. And in Kerberos delegation, because it works on blacklist, once you approve for an application to perform delegation, then it works for all the users or basically the entities in the domain.
Okay, now it's coming back to me. I remember the days of Kerberos where once you accepted it, it was good for a broad area. So, say an entire domain.
I would refer to um, the OT area where there are many ways that there are many real world scenarios where delegation is performed. Kerberos delegation, like jump servers, operators needs to access SCADAs through jump servers. So because Kerberos delegation and Kerberos, again, because Active Directory manages all identities and authentications itself in the on-premise, then um, for the operator to work in SCADA, then it must go through all the authentication mechanism of Kerberos.
Okay, jump servers, that's really scary because you've got a managed security team on your network pivoting around looking at things, and you've just given them authentication to do whatever.
And if an attacker has obtained a weak user in the domain, it could elevate its privileges. And we found and actually demonstrated it using our vulnerability. We took a weak user, we applied our checksum step vulnerability, we downgraded the entire authentication, and then we managed to obtain machine account privileges on a sensitive account, on a sensitive machine account, like a jump server or even a domain controller. Once you manage to obtain domain privileges, domain controller dominance, it doesn't matter um, anymore which protections you have. You just obtain yourself any of the old Active Directory attacks, like DisSync, synchronizing credentials, or a forgery of Kerberos ticket.
So again, this particular CVE has been around for a couple months. I'm surprised that, well, I'm just now hearing about it.
I'm in the security scene for over 15 years, and identity is in the subject only in the past few years. So the awareness is here. Now it's time to apply and understand how authentication work and how identity is applied in your systems and where are the NHIs. And so in the OT world, it's very difficult to change and upgrade. So progressing into modern authentication is acceptable. What we can do better is try to find a ways to mitigate without requiring to shut down all the systems. In my own opinion, I'm glad it's in the subject, but we need to step further from just monitoring to protecting.
So if we summarize, upgrade Kerberos if you're able to do so. If not possible, then there's a PowerShell that you can use to set the flag to restrict sensitive data.
You can apply the PowerShell command, and there is no reboot needed. Your entity will just apply into the delegation blacklist, and the delegation will be disabled immediately. And the ticket and the Kerberos ticket won't be forwardable to other resources.
Kind of think this is kind of cool because when you're working within the existing protocol and finding a nuance there that is relatively painless to administer, that's much better than forcing a patch out on systems that might not handle the patch very well.
Right. My advice is to apply the PowerShell command slowly, monitor what implications may apply, and it's very easy to reverse the PowerShell command if you find an extreme case scenario where a machine must be delegated on behalf of another machine. This scenario shouldn't be happening in the real world, as delegation is intended for users.
This is so true of the OT IoT space, where old protocols and legacy methods are being recycled because, oh, well, they enable communications. Yeah, they do that, but then there are these other issues around it that were not considered.
Right. So, in terms of authentication, where an OT system manages to upgrade from NTLM, which its first version reaches its end of life very recently, and to Kerberos, which is considered modern in the on-premise, then all these extensions comes to complicate things. And where as a security researcher, where I hear a protocol extension, I hear an expansion of the attack surface. So delegation, in my opinion, widens the attack surface to a backend channel that nobody knew about. So after we finished disclosing the vulnerability, we found that not only users can perform delegation, but also machine accounts, which is a completely different entity. And this is a very malicious exposure where we can actually obtain privileges to machine accounts, which are not considered users.
This also applies to AI and the presence of agentic agents basically interacting with machines.
I think it's a really interesting subject, authentication in Active Directory. It's something that when AI is now showing up, people tend to forget that Active Directory exists. OT systems rely on it to manage identities. So it's still relevant, it's still important, and it's still very hard to mitigate. I think when identity when AI agents work in a managed environment like Active Directory and uses Kerberos protocols, they are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. If they perform delegation, this is why no matter which system runs in your environment, it is important to know which authentication mechanism they're using. Even if it's certification authentication, and Kerberos has that extension, and it has its own weaknesses, then understand if your AI agent is requiring to use other kind of resources, and it uses Kerberos delegation to do that.
Hey, if you're enjoying Error Code, tell a friend. I'm sure there are other people out there who like narrative information security podcasts. And I'd really like to hear from you. Go to errorcodepodcast.com to get more details. And tell me what you like, and even what you don't. I've got some great episodes coming up. We'll have more on Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and hacking utilities supply chains. Subscribe today. I don't want you to miss out.